We're going to hear next from Hanna Reid Ford, a PhD student in ethnobiology at the University of Kent, England, and a senior policy advisor for environment and resiliency, Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency in the Cayman Islands.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to say that everything I've heard today at the conference has been so incredibly inspiring. There's so much work going on around the globe to reinvigorate past wisdoms to help us solve our current challenges and those in the future, and it's so inspiring. And I want to take you now to my home country, which is some 3,500 kilometers away from Peru. 3 lovely little islands, which until recently were counted among the most remote, unknown, and unchanging of the United Kingdom's overseas territories. At some point in the late 1590s, artists and scribes yet unknown penned an intriguing manuscript documenting the plants, animals, and people of what was then known as the Indies. And among the dozens of illustrations contained in this manuscript, one stands out, that depicting the L'Île des Caïmans, one of 3 islands which eventually became known as the Cayman Islands. The author describes it as an island on which nobody lives because there is no fresh water, and also because the soil does not produce any goods except a great number of caimans and turtles which live upon the sea as well as the land. And since the place is deserted and almost infertile, it is besides dangerous for the navigators who are afraid to approach closer than 2 leagues. And it's actually one of the only illustrations in the manuscript that doesn't include people. Almost 150 years would pass before the first permanent human settlements were established in the Cayman Islands. And over the next 300 years, a diverse mix of people, deserting soldiers, shipwrecked sailors, enslaved people, loggers, privateers, and pirates, would make their home where no other humans had ever dared before, cultivating over time a uniquely Caymanian cultural identity. And actually on Thursday, there's a contingent here from the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands. And on Thursday, William Helprecht is going to be delving a little bit deeper into the significance of maps to Caymanian cultural identity. And I know this map resonated with me because it shows what Cayman might have looked like as when early Caymanians first encountered it. And even though the illustration is definitely not a true depiction of Grand Cayman, it's remarkable to me how recognizable the plants are, even 400 years later. The trees that twist backwards, blown over by the constant sea breeze. That's a birch tree, for example. And then, these trees with their golden leaves could be mahogany. Those golden leaves were what people who were logging for mahogany would have searched for in the landscape. And even the large bromeliads, which could be our Agave caymanensis, our endemic century plant, or corato. So it's kind of neat that even 400 years later, we can still maybe look at this map and get some images. And when you look past the glossy images of white sand beaches that are usually used to market Caribbean islands, and the Cayman Islands is no exception to that, and you take in the rugged, dry landscape that lies beyond, it's easy to see why it maybe took so long for people to make a home here. And it's hard to put into words just how unforgiving the terrain is. The iron shore rock is brittle but very sharp. The bush is low and tangled. There are no ready sources of fresh water, and the land is pockmarked by sinkholes and caves. So it's small, it's remote, it's rugged. It's the kind of place where it takes temerity to survive, whether you have roots, wings, fins, or feet. And yet, whether in spite of or because of our size and our remoteness, the Cayman Islands is home to a remarkable repository of biodiversity. And around the world, islands are considered biodiversity hotspots, and they are home to a disproportionate amount of the world's threatened biodiversity. The 14 UK overseas territories contain 95% of the biodiversity for which the UK is legally responsible under the Convention for Biological Diversity. And the Cayman Islands is considered the 3rd most biodiverse of the UCOTs, based on documented species. And there's a huge asterisk beside documented species because we lack so much data on our species, particularly our insects, for example. And new records and species continue to be discovered across the UCOTs and even in Cayman. Cayman's so small, you would think, oh, we've definitely seen everything, we've definitely discovered everything. And I have actually myself been involved in the discovery of 2 new plant records for the Cayman Islands. And it's estimated that there may be as many as 70,000 additional native species to be discovered across the Yukon. And my research is focused on our incredible botanical biodiversity, but the Cayman Islands is also home to an incredible range of plant and animal species, as well as the unique marine and terrestrial habitats that support those species. And for the majority of our island's history, circumstance necessitated that Caymanians had to be aware of this incredible biodiversity, aware of their natural environment, able to build live catboats out of trees like plotnut, pampero, and Spanish elm, able to watch the clouds and see stormy weather on the way. So knowledgeable about turtles that they were able to confirm facts about these remarkable creatures long before science was. And they knew about the plants around them. They roofed their houses with silver thatch, framed their walls with ironwood, and they knew which plants could heal them, like headache bush, fever grass, worry vine. And this knowledge is what Archie Carr in his book, The Windward Road, called mostly right folklore. The kind of folklore that has to be mostly right or somebody will stop. And that's what we kind of refer to these days as traditional environmental knowledge. And traditional environmental knowledge goes beyond just that content. It's also practice, it's process, it's systems of knowledge. And it embodies not just practical sort of information about the natural world, but also these culturally distinct ontologies of connection between people and place, which are generally derived over generations. And once viewed as little more than folkloric vestige of bygone eras, which was susceptible to both erosion and contamination, traditional environmental knowledge is increasingly recognized as being dynamic, adaptive, communal, experiential, and essentialist. It's distinct from and complementary to scientific ways of knowing nature in a number of important ways. And I think what's increasingly coming out in the literature is that these ways of knowing are not hierarchical to each other, and nor are they inherently oppositional. They both offer opportunities to better understand, appreciate, and safeguard our natural world. And traditional environmental knowledge is increasingly being acknowledged across a variety of fields, disciplines, and sectors for its potential to offer those important insights about how our world works, and also culturally based frameworks for addressing environmental problems. And around the world, global processes like industrialization and urbanization are contributing to an increasing separation between people and the natural world, interrupting those culturally based processes which produce and sustain traditional environmental knowledge, in turn resulting in the degradation of the natural elements upon which that knowledge is based. So it's one of those sort of self-fulfilling prophecies or reciprocal cycles. And Cayman is no exception. Our islands have experienced rapid and significant socioeconomic, geopolitical, and technological change. And I always go to my granny because my granny is 86 now, and she remembers the first roads being paved, the first planes coming in, and now multiple jets roar over her house every single day. And that's one person's lifetime. And now, instead of this community that was really in touch with its natural world, that relied on its natural world, so the natural environment so directly, we now almost exclusively rely on imported food, imported fuel, imported goods. Well, this map shows you a little bit of how much our natural environment has changed. This only went from the 80s to 2022, but if you especially focus on the sort of western side of the island, you can see we've lost almost 76% of our mangroves on that side of the island. And I think this quote from one of our National Archives oral histories that really sums it up. This is from Tidyman Cromwell Ebanks, and he said, the old people, they were blessed with wisdom. I don't think we come up to it today, and why we don't come up to it is because we don't have to. We don't have to. In them days, even if you want it, you couldn't get it if it's currency, because it was not here to get. Because there is a saying, we are founded upon the seas. Well, this was founded upon the rock also. We lived from the ocean and the land. That's how we survived. That's how we came to where we is. And at the same time, that we have been experiencing this increasing separation between our natural environment and people, where there's been this concurrent trend in what is being called plant blindness. And later authors have now termed plant awareness disparity, which is the inability to notice, understand, and appreciate plants. And even though there's some sort of physiological reasons why people may be more or less able to recognize plants, the growing consensus within the literature is that it comes down to cultural factors. So why does this matter? Why should we care that plants tend to be overlooked and underappreciated? And I wanted to ask a question just now to everybody. If you can tell me 5 plants you'd interact with today.
Peppermint.
Peppermint, yeah, perfect.
Tulip.
Tulips.
Holly.
Holly.
Daisies.
Daisies. Perfect. Lavender. Lovely.
Yeah.
And are some of us in this room wearing plants right now? And are some of these tables made of plants right now? We still rely so much on plants, even though we can't see them. And the real world consequences of plant awareness disparity are serious. You know, the fact that people around the world have lost or are losing their culturally based ability to interpret the natural world is a serious impediment to sustainable development, to resiliency against climate change, and to the conservation of global biodiversity. So in this context, what does it mean to rise rooted? Biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution are considered some of the most pressing environmental challenges of our time. And they all have that human nature disconnect at the heart. At the global and local scale, unsustainable models of consumption, development, and education have foundations in the growing human nature divide. And in turn, those models deepen and perpetuate that disconnect. So if we are to address those challenges, we have to break this self-perpetuating cycle. We have to find ways to restore and reactivate culturally based connections between humans and the natural world. And we have to find ways to increase awareness, understanding, and appreciation of plants. And, you know, while most current day Caymanians, I would say, no longer have to rely on their natural environment to meet their daily basic needs, not directly at least, the importance of plants to human survival has not lessened. And plants continue to be powerful allies for the well-being of people everywhere, and they're essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The efforts to increase sustainable development, climate resiliency, and biological diversity can only be successful if they are matched by efforts that aim to increase awareness, understanding, and appreciation of plants through the conscious cultivation of biocultural connection. Just a little bit about my research aims in the last couple of minutes, but I'm in the very early stages of my PhD, and I really want to try and understand what does the body of Caymanian traditional environmental knowledge look like? How does that relate to plant awareness or lack thereof in the Cayman Islands? And then what efforts can be designed and developed to link to traditional environmental knowledge and plant awareness and to increase those in our community? And I hope that this research will serve, as an opportunity for restoring and sustaining the linkages between Caymanian culture and biodiversity locally, but also bring together some very distinct areas of focus in the literature into sort of a more cohesive investigation for enhancing sustainability generally. I'm going to skip ahead to just my closing quote. This quote, I think, really sums it up for me. It's a quote by ethnobiologist Steve Wolverton, and says that problems of human environmental impact cannot be solved unless the values of people in contemporary societies change. And values do not change unless experiences change. The clearest path to initiating such progress is through direct encounter with plants, animals, environments, and the outdoors, Earth. As both content and process, the active revitalization of traditional environmental knowledge offers the opportunity for us to come up to those old wisdoms that Heidemann Cromwell was speaking about. Those wisdoms that are the product of direct and repeated encounters with the natural world. And by embodying the centralism of nature within human experience, traditional environmental knowledge offers a very unique pathway for cultivating those connections, to revitalize biocultural diversity, and to help us recognize our plants and the allies that they are in the fight against change. Thank you very much.